Hey, it's Aaron. Just a quick caveat before I start this video. I go into great detail about how we should be knocking on doors, going to people's houses, and talking to people directly about how we can form communities and form unions, that sort of thing. Well, you'll see when I talk about it, but I just want to say, under the fact that we are now clearly facing a global pandemic and a lot of places are in a state of emergency, you're not supposed to be getting within 6 feet of anybody, and you're supposed to basically be staying inside of your house and being self-quarantined. Obviously, a lot of the things that I'm talking about, you're going to have to modify to do online or over the phone, that sort of thing, because of the pandemic. So, even though I say go out, knock on doors, that sort of thing. You can, once the pandemic is over, it's definitely a great time to start doing that. But until then, try to just stay safe, try to stay inside of your house, and do as much of this as you possibly can from your little clickety-clack computer at home. So let's get into it. Hey, it's Aaron. We're talking tactics. Let's get into it. So, very first thing, before we actually get into the meat of this video, like I always like to do, I want to just give a little bit of a disclaimer, basically that I do not condemn nor condone any of the things that I'm talking about in this video. This video is nothing more than a bit of information for educational purposes. Now, with that being said, let's get into it. So, as you can see from the title of this video, we're going to be talking today about rent strikes. Now, the reason why we're talking about that is because obviously in the last couple of weeks we've entered into a global pandemic. And it seems as though all of the elected representatives, all of the officials in charge, have absolutely no plan or little to no plan when it comes to people and having to pay their rent. A lot of people aren't able to go out to their jobs because a lot of public transit is shut down. A lot of people are being told that they have to work from home, or they're not able to actually leave their houses because they're quarantined. It's a really crazy situation to be in, but because of that situation, we are in a massive problem where a lot of people aren't going to be getting the funds that they need to be able to pay their rents on time or at all. A lot of people might be losing their jobs because of the epidemic, and also because of, horrible economic strategy and the fact that we use capitalism in the first place. We are also, at the same time as this, entering into a global recession, and that could create problems where we basically have an unemployment rate that could go all the way up to 20%, which is insane. So obviously there is massive problems. Obviously people are going to be having a hard time paying their rent. So what do we do? Well, a lot of people in the past have done something known as a rent strike. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this today, and I'm going to tell you that a lot of the information that I'm using here today comes from a lot of different sources, but specifically a video that I'll link in the description box below known as This is Park Place. It outlines in much more detail how to go about doing a rent strike in real life, and it documents how an entire community got together and actually worked with one another to do a rent strike. And it's really interesting, it's really informative, and you should definitely go check it out. So go do that. With all of that being said, let's get started. There are three main things that you have to take into consideration when you are doing any sort of activism, when you want to actually get people involved in doing a thing. And I'm going to go through them step by step. And it's really quite simple, and it all has to do with a tactic that I've been talking about for, over a year now, known as the mass line. Now, the mass line, for a lot of people that don't know, is one of the most important tactics that socialists and communists and anarchists and anybody left of center has ever used. It's one of the most important tools that we've ever had for gaining class consciousness and building communities and getting people motivated to not just go out and protest, but to actually gain something from those protests. And it's a really simple strategy, but it has a lot of moving parts. There's no specific outlined way that you can go about doing it every time. And it is also, one of the things that is going to take an incredible amount of work. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. It, in fact, is something that is so doable that so many people all across the country, all across the world, all across history have done successfully, and you can too, but you have to be willing to put in the time that it takes and all of the effort that it will take. Okay, so the very first thing that you want to do is step one, gather information. Now, gathering information is one of the most important parts of this because that is going to be the baseline that you use to build off of that so you can have a direct action strategy to actually solve the problem. So information gathering is step one, and it's the most important thing that you have to do. And how do you go about doing something like that? Well, that's where this whole knocking on doors, going door to door thing comes into play. A lot of people have told me, Aaron, if you're an anarchist and you go knocking on doors, people are going to close their door on you at best or chase you away with a shotgun at worst. It's an absolutely horrible idea. And you know what? Maybe if you're going door to door saying that you're an anarchist or saying that you're a communist, that might happen. But if you're going door to door in a community of people that are having the same kind of problems as you are, and you're bringing up relatable topics and ideas and points, there's a good chance that a lot of people are going to agree with a lot of things you have to say, and maybe just shy away from directly saying the scary C word or saying socialism or anarchism or anything like that. Maybe talk about the policies themselves rather than the names that we give to those policies, because as we all know, people just don't understand labels. So as soon as they hear a label, they're going to immediately get their back up and they're not going to listen to anything else that you have to say. So forget the labels, talk about policy specifics, and that will get you in the door. Now, going door to door and talking to people means that you all have some sort of similar problem at that time. Now, in the video that I was watching, This is Parkdale, what was happening in that area was gentrification was increasing the rents and forcing people that were minorities or in poverty out of the houses that they had been living in, and basically forcing them into squalor. They would not be able to afford the rent, so they would end up having to live in places that were horrible or become homeless. That was the problem that they were facing. Very similar to what a lot of people might be facing right now, where they don't have jobs and they're unable to work in this pandemic, so they aren't going to be able to afford their rent. When certain people went door to door, they brought those problems up, and the people that were answering those doors and listening to those problems brought up problems of their own. Now, it wasn't just that people couldn't afford their rent. That was obviously a huge issue, but there was a lot of other things as well. Some people had problems with the way that the landlords were keeping up the places, not getting rid of pests, or not keeping things fixed and repaired. Other people were upset about the treatment that they had felt from the management of that landlord agency, whatever the hell you call that, property management company. So they wanted to get involved in that as well for those reasons. And you'll notice that when you start talking to people, they're going to give you a lot of different reasons why they all feel this sort of anxiety or anger toward the thing that they want to fight against. And our job as organizers or as people that want to do outreach or activism is to listen to all of those problems, ingest them, digest them, absorb them. You have to be very absorbent, and really try to think of solutions that can help out those people in those sorts of situations. You can't afford rent, you are laid off, you're sick, all of these different things. You have to ask these questions and find out why these people are upset. Find out what will make them happy and find a solution that will make everybody benefit at the end. So that's step one. Step two is to take those people that you've talked to and get organized with them. A great idea is to do something known as a lobby meeting if you live in an apartment building, or maybe if somebody has a large house and you live in a community, maybe you could all meet there. And that's when you start talking to these people in a larger group. When you are talking to people one-on-one, you get a lot of great information. But when you're talking to people in a larger group, I mean, all of a sudden, this momentum starts to build, and people start listening to everybody else's grievances and realize that they're not alone. That's extremely important. Finding out that you're not the only one that's having all of these problems, everybody else around you is having them too. And that's something that we don't have very much of in our modern society. We don't have the ability to go out and talk to individuals, to talk to one another in our communities because we are isolated from them. We're taught that you're not supposed to talk to strangers, that you're not supposed to talk to your neighbors, that you're not supposed to communicate with people outside of your own home or family or friend group. Rarely, if you're living in the city, do you ever talk to your next door neighbor and even find out what their names are. But that's something that you're going to have to do, and you'll realize that once you do that, people start to open up. They start to become warmer, and you start to really build that community and gain back all of those bonds that we've lost throughout time. It's really important, and it's an excellent step to get people motivated to go do a thing. So now everybody's in a group, and they're all talking to each other. They're all finding out that they have shared grievances, and they're all trying to figure out solutions to those problems. That's a great thing. Now, what we have to do as organizers, as leftists or socialists or post-capitalists, is try to inform these people that there are ways to fix these problems, to alleviate the stress that they haven't heard of before. Now, it isn't a good idea to push your ideas on these people. It is a better solution to have these sorts of solutions bubble up organically. But since you might have some more information that a lot of these people don't have, it's a great idea that you inform them on certain things like collective bargaining or like the idea of a rent strike. Now, when you're going into one of these great big meetings, it's going to be intimidating. There are going to be a lot of people with a lot of diverse opinions. It will feel a little bit chaotic and a little bit disorganized at first, but eventually it will turn into a cohesive unit because you are all working together for the same goal. You're going to have personalities that are going to be, bombastic. You're going to have interesting different disagreements or agreements with all sorts of people, but that's why this is so important. Getting all of those different ideas together, getting all of those people's heads together will inevitably make you all stronger. The more heads that are together, the more ideas you're going to have and the better solutions that you're going to come up with. You're not going to be able to come up with all of the solutions by yourself. Hello, kitty. Because a lot of people are going to be able to come up with much better solutions than you are. But if you have ideas that you read about in some sort of 1800s literature that might work, then definitely try that out. Or if you have some sort of contemporary idea that you heard from a contemporary anarchist or socialist or whatever it is, then talk about those things too. What is essentially happening is you are organizing a community into a committee. You're basically turning all of these disaffected people, all of these people that would usually never talk to each other, into basically a union. And that's fantastic. Syndicalism is a wonderful way to get things done because once you have all of these people together, you can use your collective bargaining abilities to gain the things that you need to make things better for everyone. And that's fantastic. But forming the committee in and of itself isn't enough. You have to then be discussing an action plan. Like I was saying before, that could be a rent strike, but it could work towards all sorts of different things. You have to be working on these solutions in a way that motivates people to go out and do some sort of thing like a sit-in, like an occupation, like a blockade, like a rent strike, or like a march, but not using those things as an end themselves, but using them as a means towards the end that you actually want. Maybe it's renegotiating the rent so you can lower it in the case of the people in Parkdale. But in our case, where we're facing a global catastrophic problem, a pandemic where people just aren't able to afford their rents at all, maybe what is needed is a couple of months of rent relief entirely, where you just can't afford to pay that rent because you're not working at all, you're not bringing in any income, so you need to have those months basically gotten rid of, basically taken care of. And obviously there's a lot of government agencies and a lot of bureaucrats and politicians that are talking about saving the people that own the houses and making sure that they don't have to worry about their mortgage payments, but not a lot of people are talking about the renters and how they are going to be able to withstand this problem. Even if you're given $500, $1,000 one time, that's not going to be enough, especially considering this pandemic might last all the way until fucking spring of 2021 from some estimates that I've heard. So obviously we need radical change, we need radical solutions right now, and the way to do that is through direct action. Now, of course, all of that leads into my third point, which is direct action. I was talking about that a moment ago, but all of this is leading up towards motivating people to do a certain thing so they can achieve their goals. And that's extremely important. Like I was saying, you can organize these people, or we can organize ourselves together as a community to do things like sit-ins, like occupations, like blockades, like strikes, and like marches. Now, when we're talking about occupations, of course, you could occupy the building that you live in, going to the actual building and occupying, say, the lobby. But another way to do an occupation could also mean occupying the yard or the area that the landlord lives in. If the landlord happens to live in some fancy fucking mansion up on a hill, then you all get inside of a bus and go to their mansion and stand outside of their house with bullhorns, with signs and that sort of thing, and make them know that you mean fucking business. You could occupy the space outside of the building, or even better, blockade the doors so any of the rent collectors trying to get in and collect the rents from any of the people aren't actually able to get through the doors. That's another way of doing it. Obviously, you can host marches where everybody's standing outside and picketing and making the entire block, the entire community know that these things are happening. Or you could go out and do a number of other things. In fact, I have a list of other forms of demonstrations in this video series that you can take a look at, linked in the description box below. So once you've gone through all three steps, step one, gaining information, step two, organizing people and getting them together to form committees, and step three, using direct action towards a goal to make everybody's lives better, then you move on to step four, which is to repeat the process. Now you've created an incredible organization, amassed a large number of people that all have one specific goal. Now you can all work together and make those goals possible by gaining more information, by going out and organizing more people together, and by using direct action strategies with even more people to get those landlords, or whoever it is you're protesting, to actually listen to what you're saying and adhere to the collective bargaining actions that you're actually proposing. And once all of you have done that, once you're together and organized and working with one another towards a certain goal, then you win. That's how we win. Collectively bargaining and working with one another so we can actually have a society that functions for the many and not just the few. That's how we do that. Through collective bargaining and through direct action. And we can gain those things through using mass line tactics. It's exactly what I've been saying this entire time, and it's something that we all need to be engaging in, especially now that so many people have realized that electoral politics are not going to save them. So we have to find other methods, other ways of making things better. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how we start building dual power structures. Once we've organized a committee or a group built up of people that are in our communities towards the rent strike or whatever it is, then we're one step closer to having, I don't know, worker cooperatives, housing cooperatives, actual dual power structures where we can defeat capitalism on a one-to-one basis and actually appeal to and give people the things that they need to survive. And that's really the goal here. It's to build dual power structures. It's to make people's lives easier and help them realize that they don't need the capitalist structure that has been created around them to get results that actually help their situation. Now, a couple of notes that I want to go through just really quickly. The first thing is that it can be chaotic, like I was saying before. It can be disorganized at first, but eventually the momentum will allow you to gain more people, to gain more strategy, and once you are working together more and more, you are inevitably going to become more organized. You're going to do better. You're going to come up with better ideas, and of course, there are always a vast number of informative videos and interesting books and those sorts of things to explain how you can go about organizing people better and to go about doing these sorts of demonstrations better. They are at your fingertips. Just take a look through the internet and you will find them. Great resources that I've found are obviously the Anarchist Library and Anarcho-Pack on Twitter and YouTube. They come up with some amazing ideas. They know a lot about different forms of direct action and a lot of interesting theories. So check them out, and I'll link them in the description box below as well. This is inevitably going to bring your community together. It's going to gain solidarity with all of the people in that community, and that's huge. Once you've gained that solidarity, once you've brought the community together, you've eliminated that isolation. You've eliminated all of those problems that people have where they just don't communicate with one another, and you've created a real community. Another thing is that when you're organizing in your own neighborhood, you're not just going to demonstrations on the weekend like some part-time activist liberal. You're actually going out there and doing things that are going to help your immediate community, and it gets you involved and invested in a way that is unmistakable. It's something that you cannot avoid. And when you're doing it that way, you are in the thick of it. You can't just go out on your balcony or go down into the street without being confronted by the real problems that are happening in your society, in your community. So you have to deal with them head on, and you're going to deal with them more passionately and with more energy than you ever would if it was something that you were just kind of hand-waving at as a part-time fun thing to do on the weekend. This is your life. This is your livelihood. This is your rent. This is your world, your community, and you have to work towards making it better. Not just for yourself, but for everybody involved. And the thing that we have to remember is not to make demonstrations the ends themselves, but make them the means towards an end goal that will help everybody. We can't just assume that going to a protest is going to be enough. We have to be steadfast. We have to be in there. You have to stay strong and stay with it until you achieve the real goal. The protest is just the means towards that goal. We have to focus on the ends as well. And the last thing to remember is you can't go out there alone. You have to use your collective bargaining strength. You have to use your strength in numbers. You have to get together with your community. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to your coworkers, talk to people that have the same problems that you do. And once you've worked together with those people, you can come up with these solutions. You have to remember that we only have this massive amount of strength if we are together. We have the ability to have collective bargaining and to make things better for everyone if we are actually working as a cohesive team, as a real unit. That's the most important. That's the thing that's going to change your world and your life. So with all of that being said, I know that this video was another long one, but I think it was really important. So thank you very much for watching. If you do get a chance, please check out all of the rest of the videos in the Praxis series. We talk a lot about mass line. We talk about organizing. We talk about different forms of protest. We talk about all the things that you need to know to at least get a small start on actually getting out there, getting active, and getting involved. You have to remember that politics is not a spectator sport. Electoralism isn't going to save you. You have to get out there, get active. Today's the day, ladies and gentlemen, so get out there and do it. But a quick caveat before I end is that obviously we are in a state of emergency and we are clearly facing a global pandemic. So that means that a lot of the door knocking that I was talking about a moment ago is going to have to be left until after the pandemic. A lot of this organizing and activism and that sort of thing is going to have to be done online, over the phone, or through indirect means. And I know that that makes things a lot more difficult, but obviously that is the way that we have to do things right now because we don't want to spread infection and make things so much worse for everybody else. Like a lot of people know, even though you don't show signs of the virus, you could be a carrier and you could infect some older people or immunely compromised people, and you could be the cause of them being very sick or possibly much worse things. So definitely use sorts of things, and thanks for watching.